Dragon is in countdown. Falcon 9 is in startup. Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for SpaceX and NASA's live coverage of the launch of the 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station. Falcon 9 is standing ready on the launch pad at Space Launch Complex 40, just minutes away from liftoff at 6:05 p.m. Eastern from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Since 2012, Falcon 9 and Dragon have delivered critical supplies and science experiments that help the crew conduct important research while in orbit. Today, we're carrying more than 6,000 pounds of cargo, food, equipment, and scientific investigations. I'm Ronnie Foreman, Director of the Rideshare Program here at SpaceX. Thanks for being with us tonight. At just about T-minus 19 minutes and 19 seconds, the vehicle is currently on track for an on-time liftoff. Like every Dragon mission headed to the station, we are working with an instantaneous launch window today. If we enter a hold at any point from here through our target T0 time, we'll scrub and then come back for our next opportunity on Saturday, May 16th at 5:43 p.m. Eastern. That's because the International Space Station is moving at over 17,000 miles per hour in its orbit right now. To get Dragon on the most efficient path for rendezvous and docking, we need to lift off at the exact moment that the station's orbital plane lines up directly over Space Launch Complex 40, which we have the great wide shot of on your screen right now. That alignment only happens for a split second for each launch attempt. If you were with us on Wednesday, you know we called off our launch attempt because of weather constraints, but conditions today are looking a lot better, and weather is tracking 95% favorable for our target liftoff time. We started loading propellants onto the rocket on schedule at about T-minus 35 minutes, and we'll keep hearing updates from Mission Control as prop load continues. While we keep working through the countdown, I'm going to hand it over to NASA's Joseph Zakrzewski, who is joining us from NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, for more info on how our station crew is preparing for this delivery. Hey, Joseph, happy Friday.
Hello, Ronnie. It's great to be back with you today, and we are coming to you from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This is the heart of mission operations, staffed 24/7 to ensure the health, safety, and success of the orbiting laboratory. And it's an especially dynamic and exciting environment during a launch like today's. As you noticed, teams keeping an eye on the weather as it played a factor the last two launch attempts, but it's great to hear that we are 95% go, and that takes us right into this evening's opportunity. Right now, flight controllers led by Flight Director Greg Whitney and the Discovery flight team are monitoring all station systems as we get ready to receive new cargo and science. And as Ronnie mentioned, Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station. Teams here in Houston are working seamlessly with colleagues in Hawthorne and SpaceX in California and the launch team in Florida to keep every piece of this operation in sync. And it's that kind of coordination across multiple locations, timelines, and expertise that makes missions like this one run smoothly. Now at this hour, and with only a few more moments to go before launch, all systems are looking good, and Mission Control here in Houston has pulled go for launch. The station is orbiting about 260 miles above the Earth, and at today's launch time, it will be passing off the southern coast of Australia, tracking south of Tasmania and New Zealand during Dragon's ascent. The Expedition 74 crew, including NASA astronauts Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, and Chris Williams, are all prepared for Dragon's arrival. They've reviewed their checklists, configured their equipment, and are ready for what will be a full day on board as Dragon approaches for its docking. Great to hear there as the fueling continues for the Falcon 9 in preparations for today's launch. And you heard that start of the loading of propellant for stage 2. And as Dragon approaches its day for docking, currently targeted for early Sunday, that's when the expedition crew will snap into action. This mission is bringing up thousands of pounds of supplies, essential hardware, and research that will be keeping the crew busy in advance of science under the station. We'll be tracking everything closely as the countdown continues to move along, and we hear more of those fueling milestones as this resupply mission gets moving. For now, I'll send it back to Hawthorne for a closer look at the launch vehicle and the spacecraft supporting this 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Back to you, Ronnie, and Hawthorne.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joseph. The Falcon 9 rocket supporting today's mission is a two-stage rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX for the reliable and safe transport of people and payloads into Earth orbit and beyond. Falcon 9 is also the world's first orbital-class reusable rocket. At the very top of Falcon 9 today, of course, is our Dragon spacecraft. Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help position the spacecraft and navigate it to its final destination, each providing about 90 pounds of force. Dragon is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. It's flown 300,000 pounds of cargo and more than 1,000 experiments to space to date. All in, Dragon has been to orbit 55 times, visited the space station 50 times, and has flown 20 human spaceflight missions for 78 crew members, representing a total of 20 countries. Just beneath Dragon is the second stage, powered by a single Merlin vacuum, or MVAC engine. With its extended nozzle and optimized design, MVAC drives maximum performance in the vacuum of space, producing 220,000 pounds of thrust. Below the second stage is the black carbon fiber inner stage, and inside of that is where the MVAC engine skirt is located. The largest portion of Falcon 9 is the first stage, or the booster. The first stage supporting today's mission is making its 6th trip to space, having previously launched KF-1, IMAP, NROL-77, GPS-39, and one Starlink mission. About 2.5 minutes into flight, the first stage will separate and make its way back to Earth. Today, our booster is headed back to land at Landing Zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which is just a little ways away from our launch pad. You can see it behind Dragon on the left-hand side of your screen right there. So now, while our countdown continues, I'm going to head back over to Joseph in Houston. Joseph?
Thank you very much, Ronnie. And yes, we continue to follow along as we are just a little more than 13 minutes away from T-0 to see NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission get underway as we continue to monitor the fueling of the rocket. Well, continuing scientific discovery aboard the International Space Station is enabled by missions like today. And as you mentioned, Dragon is carrying over 6,000 pounds of cargo, including critical science hardware and samples. The science aboard Dragon represents months and in some cases years of preparation by dedicated scientists and engineers, and here are some of the highlights of what's inside Dragon today. The Odyssey research investigation evaluates how well Earth-based microgravity simulators recreate space conditions. Researchers will examine bacterial behavior in space and compare the results to experiments conducted in microgravity simulators on Earth. Another investigation we're looking forward to learning more about is STORY. The story behind STORY is an instrument that monitors charged particles in orbit around the Earth. These particles respond to space weather and can impact human assets like power grids and satellites. STORY could help researchers gain knowledge to better predict and respond to these changes. Laplace studies the movement and collision of dust particles in microgravity to understand particle motion in space and other atmospheres. Researchers hope to learn more about Earth's origins and provide fundamental understanding of how these planets in our solar system came to be in existence. The green bone investigation observes how bone cells grow and develop on a bone scaffold that is actually made from wood, and it'll be in space. Microgravity results could help researchers improve products that treat fragile bone conditions such as osteoporosis. The SPARK investigation is how red blood cells and the spleen change in space. Researchers will observe human samples and imagery taken before, during, and after spaceflight to identify ways to protect astronaut health during long-duration space missions. And these are just some of the incredible research flying to the International Space Station aboard today's mission, and you can find out more at nasa.gov/ISS-science. Now, in addition to this incredible research, this mission is carrying several bulk overwrap bags, or here at NASA we call them BOBs, delivering a mix of standard and crew-specific, shelf-stable, and fresh food items to support crew health and morale on orbit. Now, these items include standard and crew-requested items that include taco kits, chocolate, and cereals, along with fresh foods such as apples, tomatoes, and baby carrots. Now, as we approach T-minus 11 minutes left in the countdown, keeping an eye on the fueling, we heard earlier that the Stage 2 RP-1 load had been completed, and we're looking at possibly Stage 1 RP-1 loading of about 90% full, and looking at liquid oxygen, which is also underway for both the first and second stages. For the first stage, they're about 83% of the way there, and for the second stage, about 40% or so. Now, as we get closer to liftoff, let's check back in with our colleagues in Hawthorne and Ronnie Foreman.
Everything is still looking great here on the mission control side of things for SpaceX. Right now, we are standing by just about 10.5 minutes until our liftoff for a couple of key callouts from mission control and visual indicators that we are getting ever closer to liftoff. At about T-minus 7 minutes, you'll hear a call out for engine chill. That's when we'll open the engine pre-valves and start passing just a trickle of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine pumps, chilling those engines down through the start sequence. We do that because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen is really, really cold. And we use that process to bring all of the engine hardware down to a cooler temperature before flowing all of the LOX and RP1 into it during flight. Engine chill specifically helps to prevent thermal shock and ensures nominal engine performance on liftoff and all the way through ascent. We're going to keep listening in for all of these updates from Mission Control, but in the meantime, let's check back in with NASA again. Joseph?
Thank you, Ronnie, and greatly appreciate it. And yes, certainly looking forward to it as we're now approaching 9.5 minutes until liftoff of NASA SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission heading towards the International Space Station, which is a perfect opportunity to introduce you to the Expedition 74 crew. And we mentioned earlier that includes NASA astronauts Chris Williams, Jessica Meir, and Jack Hathaway. They're also joined alongside by Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kudzverchkov, who is the station commander, Sergei Mikheyev, and Andrei Fedyaev. Also joining him on board the International Space Station is ESA astronaut, or European Space Agency astronaut, Sophie Adno. Now on tap for docking as the Dragon spacecraft makes its way closer and closer to station, it will be Hathaway of NASA and Adno of ESA that will be monitoring the Dragon spacecraft as it gets closer and closer to the orbiting laboratory. Now for Chris Williams, Sergei Kudzverchkov, and Sergei Mikheyev, they would arrive on station last November on Thanksgiving, November 27th, and are now entering or moving through their 169th day in space. And for Jessica Meir, Jack Hathaway, Sophie Adno, and Andrei Fedyaev, they would launch back on February 13th aboard Dragon Freedom as a part of Crew 12 and are moving through their 91st day in space. Well, as we get closer and closer to engine tilt, taking a look at the updated fueling, it looks like the Stage 1 RP1 load is about to wrap up, about 90% of the way there for the liquid oxygen of the first stage, and about 60% for the Stage 2 liquid oxygen. But for now, as we get closer and closer to, as Ronnie mentioned, engine chill, and we continue to progress in the countdown, now reaching 8 minutes to go until liftoff. Back to Ronnie Foreman in Hawthorne.
So as I mentioned earlier, now we are standing by for some of those key callouts and visual indicators that we are getting closer to our T0 time. The next major visual milestone we're going to get is actually about the transporter erector, which is the tall truss structure standing to the side of Falcon 9. You've got a view of it there on the right-hand side of your screen, and again, we have LZ40 over there on the left. Those two clamp arms up at the base of Stage 2 are used to stabilize Falcon 9 during our propellant loading, which again began at about T-minus 35 minutes. The TE, which again is that large trussed piece on the right-hand side, is used both to roll Falcon 9 out to the pad and then raise it into the vertical launch position. It stays connected through the final seconds of the launch countdown. We will see those stabilizing clamp arms open up around the second stage.
Engine chill has started.
At about T-minus 4 minutes and 17 seconds. But there we did just get that announcement from Mission Control that engine chill has begun. Fun fact, the super chilled liquid oxygen on board Falcon 9 is at about 300 degrees below zero. Everything is still looking good for an on-time liftoff just under 6.5 minutes from now, and we are still tracking 95%.
Stage 1 RP1 load is complete.
95% favorable launch weather conditions at our T0 time, and we did just hear the confirmation that RP1, or Rocket Propellant 1, has been fully loaded onto Stage 1. Right now, we are just about 2 minutes away from those clamp arms opening up around the second stage. As I mentioned before, those clamps help to stabilize the rocket during fueling. They also prevent movement in high winds, but once they're open, the rocket will be fully free at the top. Then we will also hear that key call out from Mission Control that our tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract, which is one of the things that helps Falcon 9 stand freely on the pad. When we do see those clamp arms start to open up, that'll take about 15 seconds for them to fully move away from Falcon 9, and then our strong back will also retract slightly. At our liftoff time, though, the strong back will kick back a full 45 degrees away from Falcon 9, enabling it to clear the launch pad.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for the start of strong back retract.
There's that confirmation that Falcon 9 is getting ready for strong back retraction. A really great view of those hypersonic grid fins at the base of the inner stage on your screen right now. Those are the primary mechanical...
Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
There's confirmation that our system is on internal power.
Lower has started.
And we are heading into the final 5 minutes before liftoff. There you can see those clamp arms starting to open up. And we should see some movement from the TE shortly.
Now, a little more than 3 minutes to go before liftoff. We're wishing to report the range is also green to support today's launch. Now, if for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity. That'll be tomorrow, Saturday, May 16th at 5:43 p.m. Eastern Time. But right now, all systems tracking well as we continue to monitor the final progress of fueling and getting ready for liftoff.
We're going to continue listening in over the countdown nets, and the next thing we're expecting is Stage 1 LOX load.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Right on schedule. The second stage should now finish up about a minute after that. Our tanks are also pressurized using helium. That helium is chilled too, so that it stays compatible with the cryogenic plumbing on board Falcon 9. During flight, that helium pressurization helps force propellant into the engines as the tanks empty. In these last few minutes, Falcon 9 is performing final health checks on its primary communications, avionics, and propulsion systems in preparation for flight. We may hear some more callouts that the engines are sufficiently chilled as we get a little closer to liftoff. And again, we are standing by for another fuel loading completion call in about 20 seconds.
And around this time, the second stage thrust vector control actuators are being tested and checked out. And this is when SpaceX moves the nozzle ever so slightly to make sure that guidance hardware is acceptable for flight. In about 2 minutes, at the time of launch, the International Space Station will be flying some 260 miles off the southern coast of Australia as we hear that Stage 2 LOX load is complete and Falcon 9 is now fully fueled. The first and second stages are now fully loaded
Dragon
with over 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene. Is now Dragon moving into auto idle. Coming up on a minute and a half left in the countdown. Now auto idle puts the rocket in a state where the flight computers can understand before it takes off.
Now we are standing by for the T-minus 60-second call-out that Falcon 9 has entered startup mode. At that point, the rocket's onboard flight computers will have taken over. From there on out, the countdown will be fully autonomous.
Falcon 9 has entered startup.
There's
Dragon is in countdown.
Confirmation of startup mode for Falcon 9 and countdown for Dragon. Our last milestone here is that our launch director calls go for liftoff.
LD, go for launch.
There we have it. Just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the Falcon 9 first stage will ignite. Once they're at full power, Falcon 9 will lift off the pad and begin its climb to orbit.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Listen in for these final 30 seconds.
T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, and go CRS-34.
And liftoff. NASA SpaceX 34 Commercial Resupply Services mission carrying over 6,500 pounds of cargo and supplies is on its way to the International Space Station.
Everything is looking good on board Falcon 9 and with our Dragon spacecraft. We heard those call-outs from Mission Control that the rocket is pitching downrange and that all 9 Merlin
telemetry nominal.
engines continue to perform well. We're just about to throttle down the engines to prepare for max Q, the point of maximum aerodynamic pressure during ascent. Max Q happens when the combination of speed
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
and air pressure put the greatest stress on the vehicle. And with that call out from Mission Control, we know that Falcon 9 is moving faster than the speed of sound.
Max Q.
There's that call out for Max Q. Now coming up, there are going to be several major events that happen back to back really quickly. Main engine cutoff, stage separation, first stage flip, second engine start, and boost back burn start. Main engine cutoff will likely be called out as MECO. That's when all 9 engines on the first stage shut down. That'll be followed by stage
MVAC chill.
There's that call out for MVAC chill on board the second stage. Of course, before we can start the second stage, we do have to separate those 2 stages. The first and second stage will be separated and pushed apart from one another when we hear the call out for stage sep. Then the first stage will flip around using small thrusters so it can head back to Earth. A few seconds later, we'll light that second stage MVAC engine and continue pushing Dragon to orbit. After all of that is done, the first stage will perform its boost back burn to steer itself back toward the landing site.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed. MVAC startup.
MVAC startup.
Great views on your screen there as you heard and hopefully saw all of those key events taking place. Main engine cutoff, stage separation, stage 1 flip, which is happening on the left-hand side of your screen, second engine start on the right-hand side of your screen, and the beginning of our boost back burn. Now coming up shortly, we should hear the call out for completion of the boost back burn on the first stage. This burn helps to steer the booster back toward the landing site and is the first of 3 burns the first stage performs on its return to LZ-40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We are expecting that call out in just about 5 seconds.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
And once again, thank you for joining us as you continue to follow along with NASA SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Now 3 minutes and a little more than a half into today's flight. Takes about 9.5 minutes to get into orbit and all set as Dragon on the right-hand side with that Merlin MVAC engine on the right. Continue its chase to the orbiting laboratory, and there you can see that stage 1 making its return back to Earth on the left-hand side. We had an on-time liftoff at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 in Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now, in order to make the left side, Stage 1, make its return back to Earth, a couple things have to happen. 2 more burns to execute. The entry burn, where 3 of the Merlin engines will reignite, and this helps slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of Earth's atmosphere. And following the entry burn, the booster will go through its landing burn. And this is a single-engine burn that brings the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to land back on Earth. And we should be hearing those call-outs for that entry burn in just a couple of moments from now.
That's right, Joseph. We are standing by for our entry burn, which we're expecting to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Now, during that entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but the vehicle is still moving really fast. This causes it to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, which are also known as the rocket's plume. That deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface, which is why our flight-proven rockets look the way that they do. The soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses, and which, with each flight, that soot builds up a little more on the outside of the vehicle. We also heard that call out from Mission Control just a few moments ago that both vehicles are on nominal trajectories. You can follow the trajectories along at home in the bottom corners of your screen. We have Stage 1 on the left and Stage 2 on the right.
Now 5.5 minutes into flight. There's still a few more moments to go as we continue to follow along the path of NASA's SpaceX CRS-34 Commercial Resupply Services mission. And there you can see a great view of Stage 1 on the left-hand side. The grid fins that Ronnie brought up earlier in the broadcast just ahead of launch. Falcon 9 is equipped with 4 hypersonic grid fins, which are positioned near the top of the first stage and are used for steering as it returns to Earth, as you heard the start of that entry burn for the first stage. And those grid fins are a critical part of Falcon 9's reusability system. So entry burn just completed as it's shut down. Now we'll look for that landing burn as it continues to make its return back to Earth, and it will begin its descent to landing zone 40 today. And on the right-hand side, continuing to track the path of the second stage, in which the Dragon cargo spacecraft on top of that second stage making its way into orbit. Now 6.5 minutes into today's flight. Now again, moments away from entry burn, we should see the Stage 1 light back up as it will rapidly decelerate in preparation for landing at landing zone 40.
Stage 1 FTS safe.
And milestones continuing to check off for the Stage 1 as it makes its return back to Earth. And we'll keep an ear out for that entry burn, startup and entry burn shutdown.
Stage 1 landing burn.
We should get some great visuals off the... So landing burn now underway, and that's the single engine that slows down Stage 1 rapidly ahead of touching down back on Earth off the Florida coastline.
Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And great visualizations there as Stage 1 has successfully returned back to landing zone 40. That's now 7.5 minutes into today's flight. We still have about a minute to go, a little less than that for Stage 2.
And there you can follow along the pathway behind me. That is another successful landing of our Falcon 9 rocket. This was the 6th launch and landing for this first stage. Now, coming up in just over 30 seconds, we should hear a call out for second engine cutoff 1, or SECO 1, which is when the MVAC engine on board the second stage shuts down. That'll conclude the roughly 6-minute burn by this engine needed to get Dragon into the proper orbit to align with the International Space Station.
Stage 2 FTS safe.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Just about 10 seconds until we should hear that SECO 1 call.
MVAC shutdown.
And then there's confirmation of MVAC shutdown on board our second stage. Now we are just standing by for confirmation of a good orbital insertion.
Stage 2 nominal orbit insertion.
And we have confirmation there of a good orbit from Mission Control. The Stage 2 vehicle is now in coasting with Dragon attached, and we're about a minute away from spacecraft separation. And we're seeing a great view of that second stage. That Merlin vacuum engine has shut down, and we'll continue to await that separation for Dragon to continue its journey on towards the International Space Station, again carrying 6,500 pounds of critical cargo, science, and supplies to the orbiting laboratory. And a great visual there on your left hand.
We're getting some great views up in space as Dragon is slowly drifting away from our second stage, which you've got that full view of the MVAC engine on your screen right now. And we have confirmed spacecraft
Dragon separation confirmed.
Right on schedule. So to recap today's mission so far, we did have an on-time liftoff at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Everything proceeded nominally up to that point. At 2.5 minutes into flight, we saw separation of the first and second stages right on schedule, which was followed by the successful landing of Falcon 9's first stage at landing zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. At about T plus 8 minutes and 30 seconds, we had a successful second engine cutoff, or SECO-1, which was followed by confirmation of good orbital insertion. Dragon then successfully separated from the second stage, and we are now standing by for nose cone deployment. I'll be handing back over to Joseph at JSC to talk us through that milestone. Joseph, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Great to work with you and the team again as we see another successful launch and the Cargo Resupply Services mission, the 34th for NASA and SpaceX, heading towards the orbiting lab. And as you mentioned, we're monitoring the nose cone deploy on the tip of the Dragon spacecraft. That'll hinge open. We just received note that the first set of hooks are opening up. We'll wait for the second set and then followed by the nose cone deploy. So once the nose cone is deployed, it'll expose the 4 forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that will execute a series of maneuvers necessary to raise Dragon's orbit and meet up with the International Space Station. And this will be immediately after Dragon separates from Falcon 9, which we just saw, and it begins with what we call now the activation and rendezvous phase of the mission. During this phase, Dragon is configured for on-orbit operations and begins after separation of Dragon from Falcon 9 and will end with the completion of the final co-elliptic burn, one of 5 key burns that the spacecraft will perform in order to catch up to the orbiting laboratory. Now, our initial orbit today for the spacecraft is 190 kilometers by 210 kilometers, and with those numbers, that represents the perigee and apogee of the orbit, or the lowest and highest point over the Earth, as we are now 11 minutes and 45 seconds into today's mission. Now, with that initial orbit, it means that it isn't a perfect circle around the Earth, but more like a very slight ellipse. And now, over the next several hours, in fact, looking at the phasing for Dragon to catch up to the International Space Station, about 37 hours, 1 day, 12 hours, and 54 minutes, give or take, to track down the orbiting lab, with, again, a docking scheduled for early Sunday morning. And that will be around 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 6 a.m. Central Time. Now, I alluded to there are 5 major burns that the Dragon spacecraft, or the firing of the Draco thrusters, will perform to catch up to the International Space Station. And those burns are the phase burn, boost burn, close burn, transfer, and co-elliptic burn, which we mentioned earlier, that final. And that's all for Dragon to not only climb up to, but catch up to the International Space Station. And there you can see the pathway of where Stage 1 and Stage 2 took to get Dragon into its initial orbit today. Now approaching 13 minutes into today's mission. Now, if we can, let's transfer over to the mission control rooms, as they are behind today's launch festivities. And you will see the teams both in Hawthorne and in Johnson Space Center. And the team's here with me in Houston, monitoring the orbiting laboratory, but keeping a close eye on today's flight. And of course, again, the team in Hawthorne in SpaceX operating today's launch. And there you can see on the right-hand side of your screen there, a look inside the International Space Station flight control room as they continue to monitor the progress of the Dragon spacecraft. Now, again, we're continuing to monitor nose cone deploy. The first set of hooks have opened. Now, looking and keeping an eye on the second set, and we'll see the nose cone start to hopefully go in motion here shortly. And now you can see the SpaceX teams on the left-hand side, approaching 14 minutes into today's mission. And then once nose cone is confirmed, we'll be joined on console here by Bill Spetch, International Space Station Operations and Integrations Manager, to go over today's missions, its importance to the orbiting laboratory, and what certainly has been a busy time for the International Space Station. Now again, docking of the Dragon spacecraft is scheduled for 7 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, May 17th, 6 a.m. Central Time, and we'll have all the coverage right here on NASA Plus and all the NASA channels beginning at 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 4:30 a.m. Central. We'll continue to monitor Dragon again, awaiting nose cone movement as the hooks have all opened up. Again, that nose cone located at the tip of the Dragon spacecraft, and now the nose cone is in movement, and we will see its first movements here shortly. Again, we thank you for following along. And now on screen, you can start to see daylight creeping in as that is inside of the Dragon spacecraft looking at the nose cone, and it is opening up to expose that docking adapter, which will come into play again on Sunday morning with NASA astronauts Jack Hathaway and ESA astronaut Sophie Adno on tap to monitor docking to the International Space Station in those early morning hours. And a great visualization again of the nose cone opening, approaching about the halfway point in terms of being fully opened and exposed to the vacuum of space. Currently in their off-duty period right now and resting is the Expedition 74 crew, but they will snap into action once the Dragon spacecraft arrives to unpack the 6,500 pounds of cargo and supplies. NASA astronauts Jess Kamir, Jack Hathaway, and Chris Williams. We mentioned ESA astronaut Sophie Adno and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kutsverchkov, the current station commander, Sergei Mikheyev, and Andrei Fedyayev. Temporary loss of visuals there on the nose cone, but it does continue to open up as we'll monitor as we just pass the halfway point. Teams on the left-hand side in Hawthorne, California and SpaceX, and the team on the right here with me in the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston, Texas, continuing to follow along. We also mentioned there will be 5 key burns for the Dragon spacecraft to make as it begins its chase to the International Space Station. The first one will be the phase burn, which happens not too long after liftoff. In fact, that'll be a little bit later on this evening. And then the other 4 key burns with necessary adjustments will occur throughout Saturday and into Sunday. Nose cone now about 70% open as the teams here continue to move along. Just over 17 minutes into today's mission after an on-time liftoff at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 is NASA's SpaceX 34th Commercial Resupply Services mission to the International Space Station, loaded up with 6,500 pounds of food, supplies, cargo, and hardware to the orbiting laboratory. And what has been a busy stretch of time, and it's always a busy stretch of time for the International Space Station, and we'll touch upon that with Bill Spetch here in just a moment, Operations and Integrations Manager. As the nose cone now nearly open, we'll stand by for confirmation. And as we await that confirmation, great views from Dragon, now over 18 minutes into today's flight. A successful liftoff, stage 1. The 6th flight of the stage 1 booster made its way safely back to landing zone 40. Stage 2 carried Dragon the rest of the way as, again, we continue to stand by for confirmation of... We continue to stand by. And we just received confirmation that they were doing the Draco checkouts after nose cone deploy. And here inside of Mission Control, we just got a great call out from our visiting vehicles officer that the nose cone has been deployed. The Draco thruster checkouts have been completed, and Dragon is now on its way to the International Space Station. So now that it's deployed and ready for its phasing burns to the orbiting laboratory with a successful orbital insertion, I'm now joined by Bill Spetch, the International Space Station Operations and Integrations Manager. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here again.
Bill, this Commercial Resupply Services mission that just launched, for you, what stands out about this mission and what it brings to the space station? We talked about the cargo and some of the science that's on board, but it packs a lot in that spacecraft to bring to the orbiting laboratory.
Yeah, it really does. CRS-34 is another great example of how the space station keeps driving science and technology forward. This mission is delivering new research, hardware, supplies, all the things that keep our crew healthy and the laboratory running. Every one of these cargo flights helps us test systems, study human health, and mature technologies that we'll need as we go deeper into space. It's a reminder that the ISS is still one of the most productive platforms we have for discovery.
And I've alluded to it a couple of times, but it's always a busy stretch of time for the International Space Station program. How would you describe the pace of operations that's been going on right now for the laboratory?
Yeah, the pace on ISS is always incredibly dynamic. We're supporting continuous crew operations, science experiments that are going on all the time, visiting vehicles coming and going, and various upgrades, all while preparing for the next phase of human spaceflight. The team is balancing day-to-day station operations with long-term planning, and it really shows the strength of our international partnership. Even as we celebrate milestones like CRS-34, the work really never stops on orbit.
And certainly does not. I know we had a chance to catch up with you during the pre-launch teleconference and more to come. And for those following along, be sure to visit nasa.gov for that information. Well, Bill, Artemis 2, not too far back in terms of mission success and a major milestone for not only all programs here at NASA, but just for the agency overall. How is the International Space Station shaping Artemis and future missions beyond low Earth orbit?
Yeah, the International Space Station is really the foundation for everything that we do from Artemis and everything going forward. Everything we learned about long-duration missions, life support, crew health, autonomous operations, international teamwork, all of it comes directly from more than 25 years of continuous human presence on the station. Artemis 2 demonstrated deep space systems, but the confidence to send crews that far comes from the experience we've built in low Earth orbit. The station is where we test, refine, and prove the capabilities that will take us back to the moon. In fact, there were a number of hardware items that flew on Artemis that were tested on the ISS.
And again, the International Space Station, that foundational test bed to continue humanity's exploration further and further out into our solar system. Bill Spetch, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
That was Bill Spetch, the International Space Station Operations and Integrations Manager. Thank you again so much for your time and joining the broadcast. Let's check back in with the team over in SpaceX. Ronnie?
Thanks, Joseph. As you mentioned, Dragon has now begun its journey toward the International Space Station, executing a series of phasing burns to gradually close the distance, with docking again targeting Sunday, May 17th at 7 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Central. We'd like to thank NASA for entrusting us with today's mission. SpaceX is honored to be part of NASA's Commercial Resupply Services initiative. Congratulations again to the teams on another successful launch. To stay up to date with all of our upcoming missions here at SpaceX, please be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for schedules and follow SpaceX on X. That will do it for me here in Hawthorne today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Back to you, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. As always, it's been a pleasure to team up with you and share this launch again with you and the teams over at SpaceX. And we hope you will join us on NASA Plus, Amazon Prime, and more for our coverage of the final approach and docking of this Dragon spacecraft, again beginning at 5:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday, May 17th, not too long from now, for a docking expected near 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Visit nasa.gov for the latest updates on our coverage and expected docking times as we follow the operations throughout the next couple of days. With Dragon safely on its way to the International Space Station, that'll wrap up tonight's coverage of NASA and SpaceX's 34th Commercial Resupply Services launch. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again on Sunday morning. Until next time, this is Mission Control Houston.
9B, another historic place here at Kennedy Space Center. Construction began in 1964, finished 3 years later.